Hello there. Welcome to our first alchemy reading. I have a topic that we're going to start with, and it's actually a premise to the work that we're going to be doing. So I thought I was being given this as a place to start because I can see how it kind of can web out into other things, right? So this topic is: love is where we go to give, not to get. So this premise, love is where we go to give, not get. I believe that I first heard this from Tony Robbins. So this has got to be like 6-7 years ago. So I can't tell you in what talk he said it or anything like that. But I remember when I heard it and took it in, my heart was open and I just knew it was truth. And it makes so much sense. So let's explore that, right? I know in our culture, in some cultures, in some family lines, in some transactional relationships, there is this idea that we only enter in relationship with people who are adding value to our lives. And I feel like, in one sense, sure, that makes sense. You could agree with that, right? But if you then put that same person that's adding value to your life in the position of having to give to you so that you get something from them, like if the value that they're adding is expected to be more than just their presence, if you are expecting that they are a good asset to you and a good addition to your life because they have money, because they have a car and you don't, because they can give you a ride to work, because they have a certain skill set that you would benefit from or that your business would benefit from, or because it would make you look better with them on your arm, so it's some sort of status grab, or because they are selfless and self-sacrificing and you feel like you can control them. Now we're getting into what we would refer to as power struggle relating, conditional love, and narcissism. Using people as tools in any way is a trait of narcissism. It's something that happens when you are acting in a narcissistic manner. And it's one thing to gather a bunch of tools and have them nearby because they're useful when they're inanimate objects, which, I suppose there's even an argument for honoring and respecting those, and I think we should. But when it's a person who has their own free will, their own ability to gather their own tools, and who has an emotional body that needs to be tended to, not just their physical body, we're going to run into a lot of trouble here, right? Because we're treating them like they are an inanimate object, like they are a possession. This is interesting. Just as a side note, my granddaughter and son got in the car yesterday. I picked them up. They were going to come with me. And we were going to do some shopping. And her dad had shaved. And she was commenting how he had a cut on his face. And she was just really focused on it. And she was telling him, telling me, look at this cut that he has on his face. And it's kind of funny that she was focused on it. She's 3 years old. He had a beard for a while, so, it was a new look for her. And she wasn't necessarily concerned for the cut. But, she was just talking about it. And I was like, oh. And I said, well, that's okay. I somehow referred to him as my son. And then she goes, no, that's not your son. And I said, yeah, that's my son and that's your dad. No, he's mine. He's mine. She was saying. And this is the first time we've experienced her with this sort of mindset, you know? So it was an interesting thing. I was like, oh, interesting. She's in a possessive phase here. Like this age 3 has now entered her into this feeling of like she wants to possess. And I was like, okay, you know, and I said, well, I love him very much. He's your dad, and you know, he'll always be your dad, and I love him very much. And she said, no, he doesn't love you. He loves me, she said. And this was so, you know, strange to be coming out of her mouth, because we've never, like, these aren't the kind of conversations that anyone's having around her, you know? So it was interesting to see this coming up. And, you know, also because it's the innocent of, you know, child that's saying it, I'm feeling like this is probably a normal stage of development that happens in all people. And so when we look at, you know, narcissism, I'm going to attribute that to be like a trauma that happens in this stage of life where we are becoming more possessive, right? So anyway, with my granddaughter, I explained to her that love is infinite, that there's always enough love, and that there's enough love for everybody, and that you can love more than one person. And she said, oh. And that was a nice conclusion, you know, that she was easily convinced and wanted to understand that there wasn't a scarcity, that someone could love more than one person, and it didn't mean less love for her. So this isn't an argument or advertisement for polygamy, by the way, because those are personal preferences, and that comes with its own set of challenges, which I have not fully explored, but, you know, I have a personal preference, which would be not to be in polygamy. But that's not to say that I'm judging for other people. It's just that I know my own limitations and desires, right? And it's not that I want to possess somebody, but it is that I want to experience monogamy and loyalty and the intimacy of one person with me. And so when I'm looking at relationship in terms of it's a place I go to give, not get. If I'm going to a relationship to get something, then now I'm leading towards codependency. Like, because what is it that I need from this person? And why am I not giving it to myself? I need what? A sense of safety? Okay, this is something I can provide for myself. But what do I need to look at within myself that doesn't feel safe? Oh, I need a sense of status? Oh, well, what is it in me that's prioritizing that? And can I look at that and why that is and challenge that within myself? Because it is not appropriate to hold people as we do objects, as our possessions. And when it comes to love, it is infinite. It's a flowing, overflowing thing, and it's really not even always an action. It's just being. It's a state of being. It's a state of being open-hearted. And when you are open-hearted and then you're in the face of others, not just your significant other, but any other, it's a natural byproduct that you would give. That giving is natural. I guess I don't have another way to explain it, but excuse me. If we're talking about like this scale of how we could be traumatized or stuck in developmental stages in life, you know, there is another side of that. So as a coping mechanism, if you're trying to get from others or possess others or control others as a way of managing your own self, you know, that could indicate some sort of wounding pattern that was anchored in at an earlier age when it was more appropriate for you to be in that stance, right? And also, there are ways that we tend to adapt to the circumstances in our environment. And sometimes an adaptive measure to the idea of living in a household with parents that are trying to get, not give, right? So some people who have kids, if they're suffering in this on this narcissistic scale, they may be trying to get something out of the kids. Appreciation, look at all I do for you. I put this roof over your head. I go to work every day. Or reward for like the achievement of the child. Oh, my child got straight A's. My child is on the honor roll, you know. Or a parent could be trying to get emotional support from a child, some very emotionally dysregulated parents could be doing that. Or they could be trying to get household chores done. They could be splitting responsibilities with the child, right? So some families have ways of coping and living that put children in the position of being trained into the idea that this relationship thing we have going is about someone getting stuff from you. And then if somebody recognizes that, like me, I adapted to this role of people pleaser, right? And then like in order to get any love from me, I had to give an act of service. And it was usually just some breadcrumbs, and I didn't always get recognition. So it was pretty scarce, but like if I was going to be deemed as worth anything, then I had to be of use, right? Because in my household growing up, the people in my household were not programmed to give love freely. It was conditional. It was always conditional, and it was based on what you had done to, I don't know, just earn it, get the attention, I don't remember ever getting praised. Like if I did a chore, it wasn't like, oh, good job, Julie. It was like, yeah, you fucking right, you did it. Because that is expected of you. So I was trained in a household where it was like not about giving love. It was about getting something out of the other. So that's on the scale of narcissism, and people can be trained into adapting and growing up into adulthood, as I did, as operating in that manner. Like, so even though I'm saying like relationship is a way, love is where we go to give, not get, there can be an unhealthy level of give. If I'm giving for recognition, if I'm giving for a breadcrumb of love, if I'm giving just to get love, now we're over into this unhealthy state, right? So ideally, what we would be giving is from our own fulfilled state and our own overflow. Our own filled up cup, our open heart is where we're going to be giving from in order for it to be done healthily. So that means we've tended to our own selves. That means that we've addressed anything in ourselves that feels lacking, that doesn't know it's lovable, that feels needy, that wants to control as a way to feel comfortable or important or safe. So these are the type of things that need to be addressed when we're looking at this concept. So we're wanting to alchemize these things, right? Let me write some notes here. So the alchemy is going to be with people pleasing, controlling, devaluing, right? Like if someone just like isn't going to give you, like when we look in terms of narcissism, one of the things you might have heard is a term called supply, And that's where the narcissist is getting what they need from somebody, and that somebody becomes their supply. And if somebody becomes a not so good supply anymore, then the narcissist would just devalue them. Like, they would just say, well, okay, I can't get anything out of that person anymore. On to the next, right? So that devaluing is a part of this unhealthy component to how we treat love in this dysfunctional kind of way. So, giving love, self-sacrifice. See, we're kind of spider webbing into all these other things that are going to take time to dissect. So this series might go on for a few readings, but let me just kind of map this out a little bit more. So if we are giving too much, or giving in a way that's unhealthy, it looks like giving to get. And if we are in a relationship to get, we are selfish. And all right, I think we might have covered it. That's not bad. There's just 3 things on each side that we have to address here. And I'm going to say, like, I suggest we all stick with all 3 of them, because everything is on a scale, you know? Everything that's true, the opposite is also true. So maybe in some cases you are in relationship with that person to get, but in this relationship, you're in this relationship to give, you know? I've had that before, where it was separated, where I was in a relationship with someone who gave a lot to me. And I always thought it was interesting. I had a conversation with the girlfriend that he got with after me, and her experience of him was much different than my experience of him. Like, for me, all the most expensive things I owned were gifts from him. He was giving to me. And for her, he was like borrowing money and taking from her. So it was just like the tactic that worked, that was used in the situation, you know, because it was easier for him to secure my commitment by giving to me, by making himself valuable to me in that way. Because he didn't have what I really wanted, which was emotional availability, right? And that's really the root cause of why we get into doing these things, because emotional availability has been tainted through the upbringing, right? Okay, so, and when I'm talking about these things, do you recognize yourself in any of these things? Is love a place where you go to give, or do you go to love to get? It's like when I sit there and make a list. Well, I haven't done this in years, but I've done it as an activity that was suggested to me. So it was like, make a list of all the traits that you want in a partner. And like, I found myself saying things like, I want him to love me unconditionally. I want him to understand me. I want him to be loyal to me. I want him to want to spend time together. I want him to be responsible, right? Like, it was a lot about me, you know? Because I didn't want him to be responsible, so because that would make him feel like a whole, fulfilled person. Now, I wanted him to be responsible because that would make it so that I didn't have to worry about what kind of person he was and what he was out doing when he wasn't with me. Like, you know? So it was really all about me creating my safety, getting my needs met. And what that tells me now, looking at that now, is like, I wasn't ready for a healthy relationship, and anyone I would have lined up with would have been at the level that I was at, which means we would have a lot of work to do as far as like sorting out what was our own responsibility and then actually taking responsibility for it. And sometimes if you could have found yourself in a relationship with somebody who you realize there's issues, and then you try to address them, but you find that the other person doesn't want to really address them. They would rather end the relationship instead of going into their own psyche and uncovering their own shadow. And they would rather go match up with somebody else who they think wouldn't challenge them as much on that, or that they could better cope with, or that they could control more, where they just wouldn't have to address the issues that were uncovered when you two came together, right? So here's where we find like these people who have discovered that they were in relationship with a narcissist, and then they're pointing the fingers and like they just went cold after I just wanted to fix this thing. And it's like, yeah, their coping mechanism is more important than their growth to them at this point, right? It's working for them, so they don't have a reason to address it with you. Maybe life will show them, if they're lucky, life will bring them to their knees, and eventually they'll have a reason to look in another direction. But while it's working for them, why would they? If there's another girl lined up knocking at their door that wants to take the role that they want, which was somebody who is more easily controlled, or somebody who's not going to challenge them on that thing, or somebody who's not going to require them to grow or quit their addictions or show them respect, that's where they're going to go. Path of least resistance. So it's worth noting that a healthy relationship is where two people go into it with this understanding and agreement for how you'll conduct yourselves in the relationship. So when you commit to somebody, you want to commit to somebody who wants what you want. So if you want growth and learning and progress, then you're going to want to make sure they do too. And if you don't want growth and learning and progress, then that relationship is going to die eventually, because we're either growing or dying, right? Like, you have to grow and learn. The stagnancy kills us, even in our bodies. Stagnancy kills us, So you have to be growing and learning. And if you're matched up with somebody and you want the relationship to have longevity, you're going to have to know that this person wants the same as you, right? You have to be compatible. And then once you are, then you know that because you're healthy enough to identify the fact that compatibility is an important aspect of this, and that you've been able to hold yourself in a place where that allowed you to discern whether or not that other person is a good match for you. Like, you're not falling into the relationship because you need something and they have it. Because here you're in a position of being taken advantage of or taking advantage of someone else. It's codependent. It's not a healthy, ideal relationship that is the ingredients to last. That would be a relationship that needs work in order to set itself up to last. And if one of the people are not ready to do that work, then the relationship is going to break apart. So doesn't it make sense to be in the position to already make that discernment when you enter into the relationship? It doesn't mean that if you're already in a relationship that you can't work with what you have, right? I know that there's a process called conscious uncoupling. And I have read reports that people who use the conscious uncoupling method have actually ended up being able to stay together, because even one person doing the work allowed the relationship to continue growing, meaning both people didn't have to consciously do it. So I'm not going to say that's a hard and fast rule. I'm just kind of pointing out that the difference and the contrast between a relationship that we go into that's dysfunctional and imbalanced and is maybe about getting instead of giving, versus the one that we go into with awareness of how to manage our own needs and to fill up our own cup and to be whole within ourselves in order to enter a relationship where we have something to give. instead of we are so needy or incomplete or codependent that we need the other person to complete us. That's not very healthy, right? Maybe it was healthy long ago, but like now we're kind of evolved, right? Like as a human species, we've evolved to the place where we are whole within ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we should be so independent that we don't have community and family around us. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, like, instead of being so like vampire-ish onto each other, we can actually turn our focus in to be sovereign and give ourselves what we need so that we are whole within ourselves and we are prepared to give from our open heart. And it's a natural process. So when you get into a relationship with somebody and you're in this healthy space of having filled up your own cup, being sovereign and knowing yourself, now you're prepared to give. And when you have two people who are pouring into each other, it's so much more healthy. Like you can just see it in the model. To be honest, I haven't necessarily lived it. Well, in a way, this is starting to be the way that I relate with my kids, to be honest. But we had to work at it, you know? It's like I said, the way I grew up, I had certain programming. And so it's been a matter of dissecting that, you know, acknowledging it and understanding it in order to become a better version. And then by virtue of becoming that better version, being an example of that as an option. And then, you know, my children meeting me there. And that has been a beautiful process. Oh, love it. Love it, love it, love it. We're not dependent on each other, but we are giving to each other. I love it. You know, this to me is success. You know, I don't necessarily gauge my success in life the same way others might when they're living in that other way. But like for me, this is success. This is victory. This is, I couldn't ask for anything more, right, than that, because it's just healthy and free, you know? And yeah, and that's worth something, right? Because they can apply those concepts to other relationships in their lives as well. Okay, so the alchemy with this comes in with, first of all, acknowledging, like if we've talked about this a little bit, and you may have recognized some of these things, you may have done them in the past, or you may have been doing them a little bit. You may be seeing these things in someone outside of you that you're in relationship with. And if that's the case, I want to challenge you to see if it's a mirror. I'm not saying that it definitely is, but if you see one of these traits in someone else, I want you to look within yourself and find where in yourself it correlates, right? So if I am tending to fall into a relationship with someone who's controlling, someone who needs to feel like they have a leg up on me, what is that telling me about me? If I am willing to fall into a relationship with someone who wants to make all the shots, who wants to be the decision maker and wants to have a say in everything that's happening for me, does that point to an unwillingness to take up my own power in making my own decisions? And can I look at that for myself and say, oh, well, why is that? First of all, is that true? Can you acknowledge that in yourself? Okay, yeah, it does seem true. I hate making decisions. I always put them off. I always ask somebody else their advice. I always refrain from deciding, and then, you know, it blows up in my face, or it becomes irrelevant, or I miss out, or whatever, right? You may recognize this pattern of not being able to make your own decisions. So then you validate why you have that pattern. So now it's going to be like, okay, why don't I like making my decisions? What would be so bad about that? Well, then I would be to blame if it messed up. Well, then I would have to trust myself, and I don't trust myself, so I'm not going to be able to make that decision. And there may be other reasons, like, so dig into your own psyche and find the reason. Now, if there's a memory of like when this first happened for you, like maybe it was modeled to you, maybe that's how your mother was, maybe that's how you adapted to be, maybe your mother was very bossy and always making the decisions, and maybe as a result you have been trained into not making your own decisions because someone else was always making them for you. Kind of, you gotta like open your mind and kind of play with it a little bit and see why this is existing in your psyche, and accept that this is the case. Like, here I am, a person, a grown adult who has been avoiding making my own decisions, and it's got me in a lot of trouble. I can see that now. It's like, looming over you. Or this is really hard to look at. I don't want to admit this. Whatever it is, accept that this is the case. Okay. Now, you may have some feelings starting to bubble up about it. Like, there might be panic, there might be worry, there might be shame. Whatever those feelings are, here's where you're going to be present with them. Now, it's like, all right, I feel really scared that I'm going to be blamed for messing up, that I messed something up, that I can't be trusted. And what does that feel like? Panic. It feels like worry. It feels like anxious. And it's like, well, okay, these are feelings that need your love, that need your attention, that need to be with you. Like, you are the adult version of you who can sit with these feelings now. That's one method. But another method is, if you can remember from your childhood that mom in particular, or whoever, right? This is just an example, always made the decisions for you. And that you got in trouble if you made a decision without consulting her. Because she said, oh, I could have told you that. Why did you do that? That was so stupid. And now you're just like worried to make your own decisions because you've been told that you're not competent to do it, right? So here's where your competence is getting stuffed down to the subconscious. Now it's like you don't recognize that you are competent anymore as an adult because you were shown as a child that you should not trust anything that you have the impetus to do. So this is a vital wound. Like, you now been cut off from a vital part of your operating system, which is connecting you to the flow and the reason that you're on earth, which is to follow your inner urges and your curiosity. And you're cut yourself off from that because of your parents' fears and worries and the way that they operated, right? Okay, so can you think of a scene? Can you think of when's the last time this happened? Like, maybe even today your mom is still doing this for you. Maybe you've replaced it with a friend, and that friend is now kind of like being the mom to you, always advising you or telling you the right thing to do is. And you don't make a move without consulting this friend because if this friend has a certain reaction to it, you don't want to create that reaction, right? Because that might make you feel that way that you're not wanting to feel, which is like you've done something wrong. So now you're consulting a friend instead of mom. But like, when's the last time this happened in your life? And now, when's the first time it happened? For something like this, I think you'd be brought back to a memory. Can you remember the first time that you felt like you shouldn't be making these decisions? Maybe it was a time that you did make a decision and something bad did happen, and then you just decided that you shouldn't trust yourself. Maybe it wasn't mom who did it. Maybe you just became insecure. Whatever the feeling was that you were overwhelmed by, didn't know how to process, or misunderstood in yourself, is now ready to be dealt with. So you go back to the memory. You're going to get into a meditation here, okay? So let's get into this meditation. This is a meditation that we'll use many, many times, and the more you do it, the easier it will be to do it. So we're going to, I think it's like 300 feet above your head is the source energy. So it's like the place that you go to when you pray, right? That space right there. Like, you ask that light that you normally like pray to. Ask that light to come down and enter your crown, right? This light you command this light with your intention and you're asking. You're just like inviting it to come. That is enough to make it come. Okay? Now, you may or may not be tuned into energy to the degree that you can feel it. It's okay if you don't feel it. You can imagine it. You can close your eyes. You can just imagine this light filling you up, entering your crown chakra, filling your whole entire head, filling your neck, filling your shoulders, filling the chest, the torso. The light is filling your hips, your pelvis, down your arms, fingertips, down your legs into your toes. Just feel that light coming into your body, filling you up completely. And now your body is completely filled with light, source energy. This is the energy that created everything, right? And now you're going to shoot cords from the bottom of your feet, or you can shoot them from your pelvis, so your root, and you're going to shoot it into the center of the earth. And what I do is I imagine kind of like a metal pipe in there, and I wrap my cord around it. You can also imagine it like your cord goes into the center of the earth and spreads out like roots, like a root system, so that's really just stuck in there, right? And now you're going to ask Mother Earth's loving energy to come up the cord and fill your body. And this energy moves nice and fast, comes up the cord, enters your feet, enters your pelvis, enters your torso, fills your chest, fills the arms, fills the neck, and your head. And now you're connected to heaven and earth. And you're going to take these two energies that are entering your body and you're going to bring them to meet at your heart space. Create a bubble with the energy around your heart. You're doing this by imagining it. And now you're going to imagine expanding that bubble to include your whole chest. Expand the bubble to include your whole body. Expand the bubble to include the entire room that you are in. Expand the bubble to include the entire home that you're in, or building, or space. Expand the bubble to include the entire town or county that you're in. Expand the bubble to include the entire state. And expand the bubble to include the entire country. Now expand your bubble to include the entire earth. Expand your bubble more to include the atmosphere. And expand your bubble even more past the constraints of time and space. So your energy bubble is now encompassing what is time and space and earth and everything in it. Your energy bubble is bigger than that. Okay, now from within this expanded space, we're holding space together, so this will be very powerful. I want you to go into the memory. Just relax, breathe normally. Relax any parts of your body that are feeling a little bit tense. Get comfortable. I want you to remember a time that this issue first arose. Now, you may be brought into a memory that is uncomfortable, that is upsetting, that causes you to have tears in remembering it. Just stay present, just stay aware, and be the observer of the scene that you are remembering. So in this scene, you're letting it play out, and you're remembering. And I want you to consider, what did you actually need in that scene? What did you actually need at that time? So this is an innate process that is built into you as a human. You could do this process even without me, but I'm here holding space for you as you do it. So you'll let the scene play out. You cannot get it wrong. You're letting your vision, your imagination fill in the scene, and you're considering and you're asking yourself, that version of yourself, what did you actually need? And I'm not going to repeat specifics because this scene is going to be unique for each person. So I want you to let it play out the way it happened for you. Don't worry about if it is actually the first time it ever happened. If it's the memory that came, that's the one you're going to be working with. It's okay. Just relax and know you cannot get this wrong. This will happen for you. So when you know what you needed, I'm going to give you some examples of things that you might have needed. You may have needed somebody to come in and explain to your parent that it would be damaging to you later if you were not allowed to be unconditionally loved during a time of making a decision that you learned through consequences that you might not want to make again. You may want a guardian angel to protect you and comfort you after you've been ridiculed, or after you've suffered a disappointment, after you've been given a fearful notion that you're not trustworthy. You may need an older sibling to come into the scene and assist you through, or be an example of how to handle it. Or you may need this version of yourself to go into the scene as an adult and comfort yourself or talk to your parent. There have been angels, dragons, whatever you need in that scene that's actually going to give you what you need. That is what you bring into the scene, and you let it play out that way. I'm going to hold the space for you to let this play out, for you to give yourself what you need. For some of you, it may be more involved. It's okay to stop and press pause on this video if you're still working through it when I start to speak again about the next step. Okay, now that you've given yourself what you need in the scene, I want you to ask that version of you if they would like to come with you. Some of them will want to come right away. Some of them will need more convincing. Have the conversation with them. Assure them that they're joining a bigger version of you that will protect them, guide them, that has been through many things. And if that version of you needs you to prove yourself because that version of you does not trust you, You could invite them to come into your energy and just observe you and how you live your life now until a time that they feel comfortable enough to join you fully. Now, once that version of you has what it needs to either accompany you or has fully joined you, ask if there are any other versions of you in that scene. Wherever you are, wherever this has happened, are there any other versions of you in that house, in that place, that are ready to join you? There may be some hiding. They may need a conversation or comfort or reassurance. Just take the time to give them each what they need. And if you need more time, you can pause the video. And if all aspects are back with you, you can return gently. Open your eyes. Know that you have resolved an overwhelm or misunderstanding that had been with you since that time. And now you will find that anything you were doing to cope with that will fall away. Anything that you were doing to avoid that will fall away. You'll feel more comfortable making your own decisions, if that was the example that you were using, if it was an ability to make decisions. I feel drawn to say, as a result, some of the people in your life who may have been serving the role of telling you what to do, of controlling you, they might not like this. They might put pressure on you to go back into the old way. You'll find that you can make the decision you need to make about that. Is this person good for you? Can they grow and learn and adapt to the new version of you? Can they allow this growth for you? Can they respect that you are a sovereign being, willing and able to make your own decisions? Now, another version of this could be that you're a person that someone else was making the decisions for you, and you didn't trust them because the decisions they were making your life harder. This could be like an addict father who gambles away the rent money, and then and then you guys end up homeless, or someone who doesn't buy the groceries or lets the food go bad, doesn't put it away, or just gives away too much, and then you're left with nothing, or whatever it is. You may have the inability to trust others. Now I want you to rewind and do this process on that. I had to cough, so I paused, but perhaps I should have covered all the bases on the things you could address within the meditation. So in the future readings, I'll do that. But on this one, I'm just going to say, let's talk about some other scenarios that could be handled in that way. And if you find yourself in one that you're ready to address, go back. I'll note the timestamp in the description so you can go back to that point and do that meditation process on the issue that you recognize for yourself, that you're able to acknowledge for yourself. So finding an inability to trust others could be one of them. This The other things that I see that I've noted in my notes here around this issue, things like people-pleasing, self-sacrifice, giving to get, devaluing, and selfishness, these all stem from a lack of self-love. And so what these stem from is the tendency to look outside of self for anything, for everything. And as we know, when we grow up as children, there is an appropriate time for us to look outside of ourselves, to our parents and caregivers, for what we need. And if there are cases where we get smothered into believing that we need them to always give us what we need, because they didn't give us any room to be building our independence and our autonomy, or if we never got what we needed, we were always stuck looking outside of ourselves, hoping to get the thing, the breadcrumb of attention, or the security, the feeling of safety. Whatever goes on there can result in this inability to trust self. And this is going to be an important, key, vital premise for going forward in this process. We must be able to look inward and know that what we find in here is most valuable to us, whether it be our perspective, whether it be a flawed perspective or not. It's the one we have, so it's the one we have to deal with. And I mentioned before in one of the explanation videos that no two humans are alike. We all have our own perspective. So no one is actually going to be able to tell you the right answer. You can get advice and you can reflect on what other people say, but your reflection is with consideration for how you feel. And some of us have a wounding around just not knowing how to feel because we don't know what the circumstance is. And allowing ourselves to be dictated by the emotion of a parent. Like, okay, is my mom happy right now? Because then I think I can be happy. Oh, is my mom's upset right now? I can't be happy. Right? Some of that stems from just a mimic of trying to be related to mom. Some of it is an entrainment, like you're just trained to naturally go with what is outside of you. And another is in some more dysfunctional ways of relating. Some parents actually punished the child when they were happy, tried to squash it in the child. Probably in their shadow, but for instance, I can remember a period of time where if I was having fun, I was told to go to a chore. It was like an unconscious program of the adults in my life where if I was like enjoying myself too much, that was not okay. There was something to be done, and I needed to be making myself valuable by doing it. Fun was not a thing that was honored or valued for me. So there could be things like that where your happiness wasn't allowed, and so you just don't even allow yourself to go there. You wait until the outside stimuli tells you how to feel. So it's important to be gentle with yourself through the whole process of learning to love yourself, learning to look inward, learning to actually consult yourself on how you feel. Because it may not have been allowed for some of us. It's going to be very foreign, and it's going to take a lot of practice and time, and that's okay. And I want to share with you that when I first came across the concept of the answer to some of my miserable issues was that I needed to love myself. I cried and cried and cried because I just didn't want that to be the answer, because I didn't trust myself. I didn't know how that was going to solve it, because what I felt like was I needed someone else to love me. I just wanted love. And so when I was being brought to the answer that the answer was to love myself, I did not like that at all. I didn't trust that. I didn't want that to be the answer. But since there was no other solution that I found, I took the steps one by one. I just put one foot in front of the other. And it was a trudge. It was like a while before I saw any sort of results. Months of just taking the steps, of caring about myself, of putting my focus back inward on how I feel and what I think, right? And doing this over and over again. And where I saw something unhealthy in what I was thinking, if I was automatically thinking I was bad or wrong, or I was shaming myself, or I was ridiculing myself, that's what I worked on letting go of. That was the next thing I alchemized. I over time eradicated the parts of me that were at war with me. And so when we start this process, we could be riddled with a lot of parts that we're at war within ourselves. So it feels really uncomfortable to be so silent with ourselves and to even be alone with ourselves. It's understandable why we find the need to distract ourselves with company, other people, with their opinions, with their reassurance, or even television shows or social media or responsibilities or work. Because these things are things that we can find, we can place our value in, and we can say, oh, well, I'm okay because I can do this, or at least I'm not thinking about that right now, or I'm too busy to think about that, right? So over time of doing this process, we start to realize where we're doing those things, where we're distracting. And then eventually you'll be like, oh, I always have that little feeling, and then I do this. I go distract myself. And then eventually you notice the pattern of it, and you're like, oh, well, maybe I'll just look at that feeling. Maybe I'll just look at it, And remember, the steps are acknowledge, validate, accept, and be present. So if you can look at it, that's your first step. You've just acknowledged it. And acknowledging it is sometimes very hard, sometimes takes bravery itself, but eventually it gets easier and easier, because what starts to crumble when you realize who you really are, at least what's happened with me, is this is who I am, this is how God allowed me to be in this world. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. There's nothing for me to hide. If people don't like it, they got to take it up with God or something, because this is it, It's just radical acceptance for me in my process. And I'm not supposed to be perfect. Sometimes I'm going to get it wrong. Sometimes I'm going to learn through trial and error. Sometimes I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. Sometimes I'm going to make mistakes. Sometimes I'm going to say the wrong thing. Sometimes I'm going to jump to the wrong conclusion. And it's all okay. Nothing that I do cannot be redeemed within myself, because I have the ability to love myself. And I've proven that to myself over time. So in the beginning, when I was first taking these steps, I couldn't have said all that. All I could focus on was just taking the next right step. So do that and expect to do that for a while. And know that if you went and took this, if you went forward in your life and you didn't take the steps that you needed to move towards self-love, then you're going to get to a point in the future where you would have seen the progress, but you didn't have the progress because you didn't take the steps. You're going to get to that point in the future either way. Why not get there with the progress you've made because you made the decision? And we just addressed the ability to make decisions. And decisions is everything here on earth. Decision is everything. And when we're talking about power struggle, power dynamics in relationship, what power actually is used for is to regulate yourself, is to tend to yourself. So if you took back your power on being able to make a decision, and decisions are everything here on earth, you have just taken a leap into a process that will serve you very well. Yay! Let's celebrate how far you've come. All right, let me know how this went for you, and let me know if you have a preference or a request on where to go from here. Otherwise, we'll see you soon.